Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Goodyear for November 29th. And in spite of the fact that we don't have a flag, I'd like you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that all members of the Planning Commission, except for Mr. Laux, are present. First item on our agenda is the minutes of the November 15th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the November 15th meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair, to approve November 15, 2006 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gelser. Excuse me. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Okay. This evening, we'd like to invite you to fill out a speaker card, which staff has indicating the case that you'd like to speak on, or cases. Bring them to staff, and they will bring them up to me, so that we'll make sure that everyone that wants to speak will have an opportunity to. At the end of those that have indicated that they wanted to speak with cards, we will ask for those that would like to make comments. So if you don't feel you want to make a commitment now, we'll give you the opportunity to speak at that time. We'd ask you to limit your statement to 3 minutes and identify yourself clearly before your statement with your name and address. Okay, disclosure of ex parte communications.
Mr. Chairman, I had ex parte communications with several members of Montage Holdings during the past 2 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, I had ex parte communications with Montage Holdings and also Newland Communities.
And I would like to disclose that I had communication with representatives of Montage Holdings as well. And actually, I'd like to thank them for flying several of us over the area all the way from the airport down to Mobile. Seeing property from the air is quite an enlightening experience, including the construction site for the Cotton Lane Bridge. Okay. Harvey, did you want to start off with Kevin before we call the first agenda item, or do it in context of the Estrella
Mr. Chairman, I think you should open the public hearing for this first item, and then we'll it does.
Then our first item of business is case 06-700-00005, Estrella Mountain Ranch General Plan Amendment, a public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to amend the general plan's roadway functional classification plan to revise the arterial roadway network within and adjacent to Estrella Mountain Ranch to facilitate future zoning and development. The proposed amendment affects approximately 242 acres of proposed roadway alignments located between Ray Road and Patterson Road, and I'll open the public hearing and ask for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Before I get into the first item that you just read from the agenda there, regarding the amendment to the circulation element of the general plan. At this point, it might be appropriate to have our consultants who have been working on the infrastructure study, particularly the circulation, the current circulation as it stands right now, to give you a brief discussion of some of their findings in their studies for working towards a realignment to some of the arterials in southern Goodyear. So if I could have either Kevin Kugler or David Sabers from RBF speak on this issue. Thank you.
Greetings, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, members of the audience, and stakeholders. A lot of familiar faces here. Appreciate everyone in attendance tonight. And then really the next leg of the journey through the general plan amendment process, which has a lot of impact on the city of Goodyear, particularly this year. We have a longtime property owner and collaborator with the city of Goodyear and Estrella Mountain Ranch who has a general plan amendment before you and a variety of different properties that over the years have come to the point where they have ripened, where there's generated enough development interest to really provide a more critical evaluation of land planning down in the southern reaches of Goodyear and take a look at those land uses, circulation patterns. There's a lot of different stakeholders with represented interests here tonight, and as part of that process, as they went through the staff and they did an excellent job of evaluating the reports and the contents that were within them, and through discussions in the process of the evaluation of those plans, it became evident of the need to evaluate the circulation in the area. I mean, a lot of us and many in the room were involved in the update of the Goodyear General Plan just a couple years ago. That culminated in '03, but times change, and there's a lot of interest in the area. So we germinated from the need of evaluating land uses, working with Harvey and Stephen and staff, have been the need to evaluate the circulation for the southern reaches of Goodyear with the pending growth, the request for growth and entitlements. Now's the time to at least take that framework level of analysis on circulation and see what makes sense from a general plan vernacular, if you will. And so the city has retained myself and my colleague Dave Sabers to take a look at those aspects of the, again, the pending GPAs and come up with a framework for the area from Pecos Road to Patterson Road. That's the north to south, of course. And then east to west would be within the existing municipal planning area for the city of Goodyear. That's also been an iterative and somewhat fast-paced process that we released the draft reports that you have delivered to you, commissioners, to members of the development community, the various stakeholders. We had a meeting last week on the 21st, invited everyone out to room 117, and had a real good dialogue with the folks as to what's important with them, what are some changes that may be necessary in order to get that a little tighter through the process. And again, that's why we're here to you as a commission, having yet another public hearing that is part of the process. And tonight we intend to have some focus relative to circulation with respect to those, particularly the 6 GPA applications between Pecos and Patterson. So that's kind of the iteration of the process. Thus far, RBF has interviewed each of the stakeholders, of course, I forgot to mention, prior to that meeting last week, of which we got together and unveiled, if you will, to them at least the draft plan. So give them the opportunity to take a look at what's going on, what's being recommended with respect to the circulation and how it may or may not impact their respective land uses. They may or may not have comments for you this evening, good, bad, or indifferently relative to that plan and how it impacts their particular GPA application. So for those of you who went through this last week, we're going to be a little bit redundant, and we apologize for that. But for the Commission and other interested parties, Dave Sabers, I'm going to turn it over to him to give a presentation to Chair and Commissioners with respect to the draft circulation plan and how that impacts. Thank you. Oh. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is David Sabers. I work with RBF Consulting. My address is 16605 North 28th Avenue in Phoenix. Kevin did a great job of introducing this. Again, this is a draft report that has been unveiled. We are soliciting comments from the various stakeholders and city staff as well. In your packet, you have this same exhibit. This is the draft circulation plan that was unveiled. Some of the objectives that we were trying to achieve with this was to provide regional connectivity throughout this region. Also looking at connections to the south down into the Sonoran Valley GPA, which was outside. This is Patterson Road right here. It was outside of our original study area, but it made a lot of sense to make sure that the roadway network in the southern Goodyear area north of Patterson Road would again connect to the Sonoran Valley GPA down here. Really tried to focus on regional connectivity, connecting all the different GPAs together, making sure that the roads aligned with each other, but also to take a look at it and make sure that some of these smaller parcels that weren't associated with one of the GPAs would also have an arterial street connection to them so that they wouldn't be left behind. Some of the key elements here, the 303 through Estrella Mountain Ranch, down, connecting into the Sonoran Valley. We have Estrella Parkway. We have the Cotton Lane alignment transitioning into a major arterial street. We have Rainbow Road providing another north-south continuous route. And then a recommendation to bring Riggs Road back onto the Riggs Road alignment to provide some east-west connectivity, Patterson Road, some type of arterial street on the Patterson Road alignment. As you're well aware of, this area is challenged with some geographic constraints with the park here. There's a myriad of state land, BLM, the National Monument here, other property over here. So really the regional connectivity in this route becomes north-south with the east-west providing connectivity inside of the region. It is primarily trying to keep the roads on the arterial street alignments, again, for connectivity, but there are some of those instances where it comes off. One of the challenges is the Waterman Wash, which runs diagonally through the region, trying to minimize the crossings of Waterman Wash, but yet make sure that we do have the right number for the east-west connectivity. And a lot of these roads are switched to some type of a diagonal alignment just to minimize the bridge crossing across Waterman Wash. Riggs Road, we'd like to see is some type of scenic arterial or other road, because this is the one that does connect off to the east and provide some connectivity here, and providing some proposed connections that would connect into the Avondale planning area over here. Again, you can see some breaks in the arterials, but for the most part, trying to put them in here. All of these developments will be supplemented by some type of internal collector street system, and we're not really showing those on here. There are some locations in black where we are showing some collector streets, and those are locations where they're a continuation of the arterial streets, and they provide, some of that connection, so we felt important to put them on here. But for the most part, we're not showing any of the internal collector streets within the different developments. We unveiled this last Tuesday, the 21st, as Kevin mentioned, and there were some issues that were brought to our attention at that time, or some items of concern, and there will be some forthcoming tonight, and some have already been sent to staff. Some of the issues are again, some of the crossings of Waterman Wash. We have a Rainbow Valley connection and a proposed Queen Creek Road connection that is in the wash. One of the items that we faced in putting this together was that didn't envision components of it being taken as literally as they are, and that we're really trying to show the connectivity through the region. So this area will be reworked in the forthcoming revisions to show some other configuration here that moves the intersection out of the wash to another location. One of the other items that we have is in this area down in here where we have this one piece of private land, which is actually contained into the monument, maintain the arterial system here. Probably not going to need all of these arterials, but we felt, at least at the preliminary stage, it was easier to put things into the map and to discuss them. And then if the need arises, to one, take them out, or two, to downsize them to some other classification. So this area here will be reworked. I mentioned this area in here. And again, the GPA applicants will have some items of concern. You'll notice Patterson Road here, how we did break up the continuity of the road, because this is, again, right where the Waterman Wash comes through. I think rather than run through each of the different GPAs and how these changes take place, what I'd like to just mention to you is that we did, in the packet, in the report that was distributed, include a land use plan that they had provided as part of our data collection efforts. And then we marked on there, which you can see right here, are the list of changes that we thought are recommendations in a revision of their land use plan, Estrella Mountain Ranch and the other applicants as well. And they are right now preparing responses to the different recommendations that we've made. And again, recommendations to the Madera, the McRae Holdings, the different parcels there. And again, this is in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions or address anything specifically, or be available as the different GPAs come before you to be able to answer questions at that time.
Are there any questions of Dave?
Yes.
Mr. Gelser?
Basically, from what I'm understanding and from the Madera petition, it seems like Rainbow Valley Road is going to be extended and will be the first real connection between Mobile in the south and Goodyear in the north, if everything goes according to plan. What I'd like you to possibly address, if you could, is what your thoughts are on the next 2 or 3 major, pieces of transportation infrastructure that you see. Assuming that Rainbow Valley Road is the first, what's going to happen? What do you see happening next over the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Gelson, that's a great question, and the next component for us in this is putting together this roadway network, working with the applicants, staff, and making revisions. And then what we want to do is actually put this to the test of a transportation model. We want to take the different land uses as they're proposed, develop the traffic volumes, and put these on it to make sure that the arterial classifications are correct, to make sure that we've got the right number of roadways, and to break it down that way. So that's our next step in the foreseeable future, in the next probably 3 to 6 months, to get through that once we come to a consensus on what the roadway network should be and what the land uses would be. As far as the actual phasing of improvements, a lot of that is going to be dictated by the developments themselves and how they come through the process, and those road connections shake out that way.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. The Rainbow Valley Road is a road of regional significance, and that's going to be the first thing that's going to be in there, and that's pretty much what's there now, or what's there. Do you envision, based on your experience, do you envision the Riggs Road alignment being something that would happen sooner rather than later, or do you see the Germain Road up in the corner, or those kinds of things? I'm just trying to get a feel for, I'm asking for your expertise. I'm not asking you to tell me what the developers are going to tell us.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, and again, I think that's kind of the million-dollar question. A lot of the actual roadway improvements that are going to be constructed down here are going to be development-driven, with following the city's policy of development paying for itself. So I don't foresee, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that the city would take on a project to come down here and actually build, a road or two roads. With the timing of this, one of the things we have here is we have the 303 on a north-south coming down here, and we have arterial streets a half mile on each side of it. Two, what we envision to be higher capacity arterial streets, which seems like a lot of capacity, but we really don't have a lot of north-south continuity through this area. We also don't know the timing of the 303, and that the 303 could be a long way away, and this development in this area could occur faster than the 303. So we think these connections are needed in an interim basis, providing the continuity through the region, with the 303 then becoming the kind of the giant, the super corridor that provides a level of service for the completion and the build out of the area. So again, I really can't answer your question as to what is the next piece.
You've done well enough. Okay, last question. In your dealings, in your data collections and in your preliminary draft, have you seen a relative acceptance from the development community, or are we going to be hearing some screaming and my ox is being gored when their turn comes up? And I want your professional opinion. I'll listen to theirs when their turn comes.
Again, another good question. What we tried to do was take land use applications, general plan amendments, with somewhat of competing interests at times, and blend them together. What we're trying to do is establish a framework where those can all be pieced together. So I know that there's some issues out there, but I think overall, and certainly don't want to speak for the rest of the community, but most of the applicants, if not everybody that I've spoken to, appreciates and acknowledges the need for some comprehensive planning for the area. There are specific components, I think that, let me rephrase that. There are components in here that impact negatively or change each of the different applications. So how negative they are and upset, I don't know, but it's been very cordial. It's been very, how do we work through these, and how do we come to an understanding? And one of the challenges that I have, and RBF had, Kevin, is taking these competing things, throwing them in a pot, and trying to come up with a plan. They know their projects better than I do. They know their land use. They know the terrain. They know a lot of things that I may have missed in the first data collection effort. And some of those things are shaking themselves out now. They had good reasons why they shifted roadways off of an arterial alignment. We have good reasons why we want to get them back on the section line. So it's really a discussion, it's a cooperation, and coming together of the different interests to, again, put together this comprehensive plan that is before you in a draft stage.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions?
Fair enough?
I have one question.
Did I get it right? No one's going to shake their head until I got it right.
Ms. Osborne.
I have one question just to make sure that I'm reading this map correctly. If you were to look at the grid area between Ocotillo Road and Rainbow Valley Road,
Okay.
down to Riggs Road, there's that blue atrial. And I just want to make sure that that atrial is not within the wash, that it's actually, because it looks like it's stating that it's in the approximate floodplain, this atrial. Is that, so it's on the outskirts of the wash but not in the wash? Is that how I'm reading this?
I think that's
Okay.
gonna get-
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, what we did is we took their land use plans, we scanned them to the computer, put them into our GIS system, and in many instances, what our GIS shows is a rather, broad floodplain that may be channelized or may not be as big as we're showing as what is being shown on the different land use plans. So we're trying to locate those roadways where we're not recommending changes at the same locations that we're coming directly out of the GPAs. And you'll notice when in the GPAs that in a lot of cases they're showing that wash to be slightly or significantly narrower than what we're showing. And that's why in our map it may appear to be in the floodplain, but when you look specifically at the site plans themselves, it won't be in the floodplain.
Any other questions?
I have one last comment. I really appreciate the fact that you have done, I appreciate the fact that the city paid to do this, because we have been banging on their heads for the last 2 months about getting, 7 pieces, and we can't look at the big picture. So, one, I want to say I think you've made an excellent first cut at it, and two, I want to say to the development community that we're going with the comprehensive plan, and you guys better get aboard if you want to get on the train. So that's where I stand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, kind of stemming off of that presentation, and I'm going to avoid any redundancy, so my comments regarding this general plan amendment are going to be very brief. But much of what you saw in that study is, at least in concept, consistent with Newland Communities or Estrella Mountain Ranch and their general plan amendment request, which addresses strictly the circulation element of the general plan. David briefly mentioned that there were some data gathering efforts on their part before they finally came up with the draft study, and they showed you this particular map, although this is the original form of what Estrella Mountain Ranch intends with this general plan amendment request. And again, the primary focus of this general plan amendment is a realignment to the Loop 303 freeway, which will essentially be parallel to the flow of Waterman Wash, and realignments to Queen Creek Road and a few reclassifications of some of the arterials, particularly Cotton Lane and Estrella Parkway, which will be reclassified as scenic arterials. So in concept, they are, the study and this general plan amendment request are both very similar to one another. One stark difference you might want to note is the alignment of Riggs Road, which I believe in the previous presentation it was depicted that it would be running east and west, whereas here it kind of takes a diagonal turn from towards the northeast from the southwest. I think at this point I'll conclude my presentation. I know representatives from Newland Community is here, particularly I believe Mr. Bull, and might be appropriate to allow him to comment on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Ed Bull, 702 East Osborne, here representing Newland and Son MP. I don't think you want me to repeat the presentation that we had a couple of weeks ago. I will say that we heard your commission and Commissioner Gelsner there with the comment, like was repeated tonight, of encouraging us and others to work with staff and RBF and our neighbors and trying to be involved in constructive dialogue and solutions, and we've been doing that and intend to continue doing that, hoping that we can collectively come back here with solutions to whatever differences there may be. I will say that in addition to being here at your hearing a couple of weeks ago, as did many others in the room, we participated in the meeting right before Thanksgiving with RBF and staff and various other stakeholders and so on, where a detailed presentation that was made with respect to RBF's analysis of various things. I assure the Commission that much of what was made in that presentation and presented in those maps and presented here tonight, much of what was presented there, we were in agreement with. As I indicated when we were here a couple of weeks ago, we'd already agreed to move the 303 sum and move this sum and move that sum and so on. And through RBF's analysis, we agreed with much of what they came up with. RBF and staff did request, though, that anyone who was willing to do so submit comments, ideally comments and suggestions in writing. Newland did that today. We submitted it in the form of a letter to staff with a map that was attached. I know that neither staff nor RBF has had a chance to review that yet. I don't know if a copy even made it to your commission. I have copies that I can distribute to your commission if you would like this evening, and am happy to do that. I will say that I think it makes the most sense that we not get into an item-by-item debate of the items that we set forth in that letter and that map unless you want us to do so. But I think really it's only most fair to RBF and staff if they have a chance to look at it, consider it, visit with us about it, and then get into more detailed analysis and comparison and resolutions before we come back to the next hearing. Having said that, we can go into more detail if you'd like, but I can tell you that we are, as I indicated, involved in what we believe are constructive discussions with a goal of coming back to your commission with consensus on issues, and we hope that we can do that with both RBF, staff, and our neighbors.
Thank you. I think that since the staff hasn't had an opportunity to review it, it's probably premature, and I'm sure that there'll be ongoing discussions until everything's wrung out.
Right. I can distribute this if you want, or candidly, you may prefer to just get it through staff, or ever what you would like. We will do.
I think it's probably go ahead and give it to staff, and that they can provide it to us with other materials as things evolve.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Bull.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Any questions of Mr. Bull? No. Thank you. Jeff Bliley from William Lyon Homes.
Hi, Jeff. Howdy. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have no idea what Jeff or anybody else is going to say, but if need be, if I could have a couple minutes to respond at the conclusion of other testimony, I'd appreciate that.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Jeff Bliley, 4800 North Scottsdale Road, and I'm here tonight representing William Lyon Homes. They're the owners and developers of the Estrella Point project, previously referred to in last year's general plan amendment process as Rainbow Ranch. I'm here again tonight to express my concerns with the general plan amendments that propose changes to the alignment of the 303. Of particular concern is the exclusive scope of the RBF study that has been used as a basis to support the proposed realignments of the 303. During our general plan amendment last year, one point of particular concern was the alignment of the 303 and how we were going to deal with the alignment. The general plan amendment that we submitted, which was ultimately approved, left the 303 in its existing alignment that's currently in place in the general plan. Throughout the public hearing process for our general plan amendment last year, the issue of the 303 alignment was brought up by our neighbors to the south. It was brought up by staff, and we accepted a stipulation that basically stated that the alignment we depicted with our amendment was subject to change and that a future alignment study would be conducted to better establish the alignment. We're here now less than 12 months following the approval of our general plan amendment, and the RBF study, and RBF is conducting a study to better establish an alignment for the 303. It's a project area they are studying which is in excess of 50 square miles, and it ends a half a mile south of our northern border. It doesn't include our entire project. There are two problems with not including this additional half mile in the study area. The stipulation attached to our general plan amendment from last year has been forgotten, and it would be inefficient and unfair not to include this half mile in the study area so that our pending zoning cases can better reflect a more accurate and substantiated alignment for the 303. Also, this last half mile is where the topography lies in this area. Within our property, there's some hills and some terrain, and based upon topography, it is apparent that the existing alignment will not accommodate where we think the actual freeway would be built. And in fact, the alignment that we're coming up with lies outside that 1,000-foot corridor. So we think it's imperative that the study area be expanded a bit. It also will affect, because we're at the northern end of the study area, when you shift it a bit, it does affect it as it comes out of our property. So there may be a little deviation to the south as well. We as well continue to work with our neighbors to come up with an alignment that works for everyone. We are here simply asking that the RBF study be expanded ever so slightly to address not only this year's general plan amendments, but our general plan amendment from last year, the one that actually anticipated the study. It's our belief that given the amount of work we've already had CMX perform at our cost and at our request, that this expansion of the RBF study would be of nominal cost and wouldn't cause any unnecessary delays to this year's general plan amendment. I appreciate your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Bladley? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any other interest cards. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the application by Sun MP and Newland Communities? Anything else from staff? Okay. If there are no other comments, any comments from the Commission? Close the public hearing and move on to our next case. Next case is case 06-700-00002, Goodyear General Plan Amendment, South Goodyear General Plan Amendment. Public hearing to consider a request for the major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to facilitate future zoning and development of approximately 867 acres of land containing 3 separate parcel groupings, which are as follows: 78 acres at the northeast corner of Chandler Heights Road and Sandia Road, 475 acres east of Rainbow Valley Road between Chandler Heights and Ocotillo Road, and 158 acres at the northwest corner of 155th Avenue and Riggs Road.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, it's Harvey. Perhaps we do need a motion to continue the public hearing on this particular case to January 17th.
I'm sorry,
That was mine.
jumped the gun.
That was mine.
Mr. Chairman, a motion to continue the case 06700-00005 to the January 17, 2007 Planning Commission meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Bay. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll proceed to case 06-700-00002, South Goodyear General Plan Amendment. Open the public hearing and ask for the staff presentation.
This is the request for a major amendment for the 867 acres of McCray Holdings in 3 parcel groupings located in South Goodyear. The first parcel grouping is 78 acres and proposes changing from low-density residential to low-moderate density residential use. The second grouping of 554 acres at the northeast corner of Rainbow Valley Road and Chandler Heights Road proposes changing from rural residential and low-density residential to a mix of low-density, low-moderate density, medium-high density, and community commercial uses. The 235 acres in the third grouping, located at the northwest corner of 155th Avenue and Riggs Road, proposes changing from low-density residential to a mix of low-density residential, low-moderate density residential, medium-high density residential, and community commercial uses. Overall, the amendments propose increasing the number of units for the area from the current general plan by 2,400 units, and that's approximately about 6,500 people being increased from the current general plan amendment. The first parcel grouping being proposed for low moderate density residential currently isn't being affected by the circulation study. The second parcel grouping currently has minor changes proposed, just a slight realignment of the roads, arterial, and possibly straightening out Chandler Heights Road so it doesn't curve up until the end of the McCray property. The third parcel grouping does have major changes to the road alignments. The circulation study proposes cutting out this arterial here and putting the arterials on the south and east sides of the McCray properties. The city hasn't received a response from the developer yet to the circulation study, and so we'll be awaiting that and then working with the developer on their new proposal. This concludes my presentation, so I can take any questions you might have.
Thank you.
You said that you have not heard a response.
Right.
Were they at the 21st meeting?
Yes, they were.
They were. Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Thank you, Katie. Don't have any interest cards on speaking on this case. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this application? If not, I'll close the public hearing and ask for commission action.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue this case to the January 17th Planning Commission meeting.
Motion to continue the case. Do we have a second?
Second.
From Ms. Osborne. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next case is case 05-700-00001, Rainbow Valley General Plan Amendment. Public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to facilitate zoning and development of approximately 999 acres, generally located at the southwest corner of Rainbow Valley Road, 179th Avenue alignment, and Willis Road in the Rainbow Valley area. Open the public hearing and ask for the staff presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. The map I have on the overhead here on Elmo is the current situation with the general plan amendment regarding this area. Queen Creek Road to the south, Perryville Road to the west, Rainbow Valley Road to the east, Willis Road to the north, and there's about a 40-acre area just north of Willis Road that's included within this subject area. This totals about 999 acres. Currently, the vast majority, I should actually say a little more than half of this area is designated for low-density residential. There is some rural residential as well, at about 118 acres, and there is a sizable community commercial portion here to the south at about 113 acres. The amendment being proposed is as such here. Again, we're looking at about 992 acres. The density that would be proposed with this amendment will be at 3.17 dwelling units to the acre. That would be up from 2.16 dwelling units to the acre. And we would be looking at a proposed areas proposed for low-density residential would be at 512 acres. Low-medium density residential at 196.5, medium-density residential at 81 acres. Open space would be about the same, exactly the same, 154.5 acres, and community commercial will be reduced to 55 acres. And as you can see here, this map does reflect the general plan amendment proposal to the circulation element with the realignment of the Loop 303 to the northeast. That concludes my presentation. There are representatives from CCCFA here as well.
Questions of staff? Mr. Curley, did you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for your record, my name is Mike Curley. My address is 3101 North Central. On the next few items, the McCrae, and I think it's B, C, D, and E, I'm going to echo Ed's comments with the knowledge that we have to be back in front of you, and there has to be some staff analysis on these where we'll dispense with any comments available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Curley? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for disposition from the Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we continue case 05700-00001, Rainbow Valley General Plan Amendment, to the January 17, 2007 Planning Commission meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. DeBroker. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Our next case is case 06-700-00003, Perryville and Ocotillo General Plan Amendment. A public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to facilitate future zoning and development of approximately 1,720 acres, generally located west of Perryville Road alignment and south of the Ocotillo Road alignment in the Rainbow Valley area. Open the public hearing and staff presentation, please, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, members of the Commission. I'd first like to point out that the actual acreage is 1,400 acres rather than 1,720 acres, as you just mentioned. This 1,400-acre general plan amendment area is highlighted in black on this exhibit and is generally located west of Perryville Road and south of Ocotillo Road. McGray Holdings, the applicant of this request, owns 640 acres of the proposed 1,400-acre amendment area. And McGray Holdings property is shown in red on this exhibit. And McGray Holdings properties with this general plan amendment would include a mixture of low-density residential, medium-high-density residential, and community commercial land use designations, shown within this area here. The remaining 760 acres is owned by private property owners and will remain rural residential, and that's shown in this area here. I'd like to emphasize that this 1,400-acre general plan amendment area is within the city's planning boundaries, and that this general plan amendment will correct a map error in the city's general plan land use map that shows otherwise. This concludes my presentation. Staff is available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Canning. Any questions of staff on this application? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this case? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to continue this case.
So moved, Mr. Chair, to continue case 06700-00003, Perryville and Ocotillo General Plan Amendment to January 17, 2007 Planning Commission meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Ms. Lauritano. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next case is case 06-700-00001, 207th Avenue and Pecos General Plan Amendment. A public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear for the purpose of facilitating future zoning and development of approximately 2,554 acres, generally located at the southwest corner of 207th Avenue and Pecos Road, and extending approximately 1 mile to the west of the 207th Avenue alignment from Pecos Road to Riggs Road in the Rainbow Valley area. Open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The subject 2,500-acre property is highlighted in black on this exhibit and is generally located west of 207th Avenue and south of Pecos Road. McRae Holdings is the applicant for this request and owns 464 acres of the proposed 2,500-acre general plan amendment area. McRae Holdings property is shown in red on this exhibit and will include a mixture of low-density residential, low-medium-density residential, medium-density residential, and community commercial land uses. The remaining 2,090 acres is owned by other property owners and will remain rural residential, and those 2,090 acres are shown within this area here. The other aspect of this request pertains to expanding the City of Goodyear's municipal planning boundary into an area that is currently within the municipal planning area of the town of Buckeye. As you know, the town of Buckeye has previously opposed any expansion into their municipal planning area. The only update I can give you at this time is that the city is still working to resolve this issue with the town of Buckeye. This concludes my presentation. Staff is not recommending any commission action at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Canning? Ms. Loretano.
Very briefly, you mentioned about Buckeye. Last meeting, there were some questions and some discussion about them annexing. None of that has happened, this area?
Chairman Horstman, Commissioner Loretano, I would ask the applicant to address those questions because I believe he received lots of phone calls from those property owners.
Okay.
Just to sort of follow up on that question, if I may, I'd just like to get an opinion, at least from staff. What is the process or procedure for annexing in another town's annexation area?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Laurentano, this one? Yeah. First, we're not considering annexation this evening. This is just a general plan amendment to expand municipal planning boundary. That's number one. From our last meeting, I did have a conversation with an official from the town. He did confirm they did annex 200 acres within this area. I believe it's in the southern portion of it, of this property. And they are pretty adamant about keeping that in the town of Buckeye. That was important because annexed land to the immediate west. They had to have some taxable property to make that annexation, to facilitate that annexation. So that was really important to them. So that confirmed. So I confirmed that. Then the other question you had was, can we annex property in another municipal planning boundary? The municipal planning boundary is used purely for planning purposes, for circulation, primarily for utility, water and sewer infrastructure planning purposes. It doesn't really carry any weight. MAG usually regulates and looks at planning boundaries for utility and transportation purposes. We're still having discussions with Buckeye regarding how we're going to divide up this municipal planning area, or if we're going to divide up this municipal planning boundary. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, so let me just reiterate then. It's first and foremost, it's excuse me, an unresolved issue that you're working with the town of Buckeye, and that it is just a planning area, and it's not as though there's an imposition from one town to the other.
It's still unresolved, and it's just for planning purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Mr. Gelser.
I want to keep on this topic. Can we see a revised map then of the area that's in dispute? Or, I mean, you know, we're seeing a map of, as Mr. Canning said, I think like 1,400 acres on this one. And, you know, I'm starting to struggle again with what is trying to come into our planning area that isn't? What is in dispute with Buckeye? Do we want it? Do we care?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I did request from the town about where are these 200 acres. I only generally know, and I've requested to find out where exactly those 200 acres are. I think the applicant, I think they're in the southern part of the 2,500-acre municipal planning boundary. The town of Buckeye doesn't want to encroach at all in their planning boundary. One, that's in just 2,500 acres. We have a request from McCray Holdings. That's the area in yellow. If you point that out, on the screen. There you go. Right, can you show them the whole area? This map. Can you point out, David, can you point out the whole 2,500 acres, 2,400 acres? So the area in gray, the yellow area, can you point that out? That's McCray's Holdings, which is approximately, isn't above there? It's the red, that's it. It's approximately, what, 500 acres? That's McCray's property. They have control over, they want to develop that. They need utilities. The other gray areas, as my understanding is, there's not a pressure for development at this time. Because we have utilities that are adjacent, or will have utilities adjacent to the area that's owned by McCray, it's more logical for them to seek utilities in the city of Goodyear rather than the town of Buckeye. Buckeye has no way of serving this area from road and infrastructure standpoint, utilities. So the applicant has logically come to us for utilities. We have a policy that we do not serve outside our city limits. So if this private property is going to develop in the future, in the foreseeable future, then it's logical that they come into the city of Goodyear. So we're just responding to a private property owner's request.
Okay. We've been mucking around with this since this first came up in October, and I don't understand, if Buckeye doesn't want to change the boundary, isn't that the responsibility of the private property owner to get Buckeye to acquiesce? I mean, why are we taking valuable time and valuable staff time? I understand the concept that we're going to plan this, and the only way that they're going to get utilities is by coming through the city of Goodyear. But if Buckeye won't give them utilities and Buckeye won't let them go, then it's Buckeye's problem and the landowner's problem. Correct me, tell me I'm wrong, Harvey.
The applicant would like to address that.
Harvey's been nice to me over the years, so I'm going to try to come to his aid on this one. Just to sort of answer some of the questions that have been asked here. First of all, the property that we're dealing with, as Harvey just indicated, is his property right here. The roughly 200 acres, Mr. Gelser, that was taken out of that was actually annexed by Buckeye, is roughly in this area right over here. And if you recall, there were a couple of property owners that got up, and I think they acknowledged that. As Harvey has indicated, and I won't reiterate it in great detail, from a utility standpoint, clearly makes sense that this property, even looking through objective eyes, ought to be in the city of Goodyear, not Buckeye, because the utilities eventually, from Goodyear's perspective, will be about 3 miles from here, whereas Buckeye will be about 12 miles. Okay. In answer to your question, Mr. Gelser, is why we're going through this and wasting, quote unquote, wasting the staff's time right now. We had to get this case in the queue from a general plan perspective. I think it's likely that the discussions on this property are going to be global discussions that are going to involve this property, hopefully, in addition to some other issues that are going to be hopefully occurring between Buckeye and Goodyear in the future. I think that probably it's likely that this case is probably going to have to go by the wayside for a little while to allow for those discussions. We've been trying to get in front of Buckeye to have these discussions. We think we hopefully will be in front of them within the next couple of months, but frankly, we're going to trying to work cooperatively with the city of Goodyear in terms of some of these global discussions. So that's sort of our long-range perspective. We know this is going to be a longer process than the other general plan requests.
I admire your courage, and, you know, I congratulate you on continuing to work on billable hours.
That's, I do pro bono work, but this is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I'm fine.
Gelser, I just wanted to clarify that it's important that we have the hearing and that we proceed, so the developer, if we are able to resolve this issue with the town of Buckeye, they can proceed without going back through the process again, so we don't have to go from square one with
Okay.
the general plan amendment.
That's
and
fine.
I have a map that shows really graphically why Buckeye cannot serve the area. I've put it on here, and it really tells a story. And the town of Buckeye officials will even acknowledge the white area that's just to the west of that dark line that Bob has his pin on. That's the private property owners, private properties. And then you see the area totally around there that's sort of in this olive color is federal land. There is no roads, there are no utilities. Buckeye has no way to get to this property. So this property, if it's going to have urban services, logically can only get it from the city of Goodyear. Reasonable people can hopefully come to that conclusion. So maybe reason will prevail here. So that's where we're headed with the town of Buckeye.
So you'd appreciate it if I don't throw more gasoline on the fire.
Well, excuse me, Chairman Horstman. Harvey, I guess I have a little concern then if we're discussing this case that sounds as though it may fall by the wayside and there will be some months before some resolution has come, yet this recommendation for this case is that we continue again January 17th. Is that now, should that be changed at this point?
No, it's very, Commissioner Day, it's very important that we continue till a major general plan amendment must be presented in the same calendar year that it's filed. So that's why we're having these public hearings. It'll go to the council next month. So disposition of this will occur in 2007, hopefully.
Okay.
So nothing is lost by doing that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for commission disposition.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue this case until the January 17th meeting.
I'll second that.
I have a second from Mr. Gelser. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Our next case is case 06-700-00004, Madeira General Plan Amendment, a public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to facilitate future zoning and development of approximately 2,363 acres of land, generally located between Chandler Heights Road on the north and Patterson Road on the south, from 1/2 mile east of Rainbow Valley Road, 179th Avenue on the west, east to 1/4 mile west of 155th Avenue, alignment on the east. Open the public hearing. Ask for a staff presentation. Steve?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, on the screen, just for reference, this is the Madeira, this is the property subject to the Madeira GPA. I know Commission's very familiar with that, so I'll be very brief with this. Staff has nothing new to add to this GPA that you didn't hear at our last meeting. So we've got some work to do with the transportation and such, and we'll provide more information on the 17th. Quick update on the annexation. We're still scheduled for the December 11th hearing before the City Council. Notices for that meeting will be sent out to the 28 property owners likely tomorrow. So on the 17th, I should probably be able to paint a better picture for you on how the annexation process is going along. With that, Mr. Chairman, we're not recommending any action at this time other than continuing this item to the 17th of January.
Thank you, Mr. Correcchia. Questions of staff?
Good presentation.
I see Mr. Jones approaching.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Dustin Jones, 1 Arizona Center. Like Mr. Curley before me, no comments. We appreciate all the work that staff's done. We haven't heard anything new to date, and appreciate the opportunity to have gotten on the record at the last public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jones on his
As he walks away.
statement? Hearing none? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for commission action.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve case move to continue case 06700-00004 Madera General Plan Amendment to January 17, 2007 Commission meeting.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Bay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next case is case 06-700-00008, Sonoran Valley General Plan Amendment, a public hearing to consider a request for a major amendment to the general plan of the City of Goodyear to facilitate the zoning and development of portions of an area encompassing approximately 95 square miles south of the city's existing southern planning area, extending the city's municipal planning boundary south of Patterson Road to approximately 4 miles south of State Route 238, and generally following the Sonoran Desert National Monument boundary on the west and the Maricopa-Pinal County boundary on the east. Open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Horstman, members of the Commission, members of the public. Chairman Horstman, I would ask that you turn the time over to our City Manager, Stephen Cleveland, who would like to make a presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Cleveland.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, all the members of the audience, and I see some familiar faces from our recent visit to Mobile. Appreciate all of them taking the time to drive up here, which I presume it took about an hour and a half to do. Which leads to a question that the Commission Chair and several of the members have posed to me, which was, it would be nice to know why is it that the city would like to expand its municipal planning area to this extent, 95 square miles. There are several reasons that this conversation has come up. Take you back a little bit in history, roughly February of this year, we learned that there were some development activities occurring in the Mobile area that were assembling about 10,000 acres. And that was approximately 50% of all the holdings in that area at that time. It was, as we began to look at some of the issues, and roughly at the same time, there was a conversation going on at South Mountain as to how you develop a freeway and run a 1985 planned freeway through million-dollar homes. And that the public, at the end of the day, was going to be paying a sizable fortune for the privilege of either buying out those homes, relocating them, and or building the freeway in some other location. That was one of the things that we were talking about. The second thing was that as this valley is going to continue to grow, because I think that everybody in this room has a desire to see their private property develop in a fashion that's probably greater than the current condition. In some instances, we have folks in this room that own the property but do not live there. In other instances, we have people living on the property that would like to develop it at a higher level if there's going to be utility infrastructure. And thirdly, there are people that would truly want to protect their current living conditions. And all those need to be balanced out as we talk about this issue. As we began conversations of growth and development, we need to understand that this basin can accommodate about 9 million people, potentially 13 million people, and if you want it by comparison, that is roughly equal to the Los Angeles basin. And if we're going to move people around, we got to have some transportation corridors. And those transportation corridors do not magically show up one day. That it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of positive approaches to thinking through this, and we ought to be talking about, quite frankly, not only the 303, how does it get connected to the Interstate 8, just like the 202 is having problems getting connected from the I-10 to the I-10 on 55th Avenue, et cetera. So if we're going to talk about what is this valley going to do and what is the state going to do over the next 20, 30, 100 years, we ought to be talking about not only the 303 and how it connects, but we also need to start talking about the 404, the 505, the 606, and even the 707. Because I believe as long as there's water and as long as there's people that want to develop their properties, there is going to be some growth, and ultimately somebody's going to have to be in the business of building freeways. So backing that logically up, how do you go about developing a corridor? How do you go about growing a community if you have no interest in it other than to say it ought to get there somehow? So part of the question was, should the City of Goodyear have an active interest in making that happen? So conversations began with the development community. And those conversations extended to the community of Mobile. They extended to some of the other property owners, waste management, et cetera, and looking at what might happen if we thought way outside the box. And as earlier mentioned, it is conceivable that in somebody's plan in the year 2045, there may in fact be a roadway. But should we be spending billions of dollars buying up roadway, or if we can work together with the development community and exchanging their land for, by them giving us land for preservation of a freeway corridor, we in fact could give them some kinds of densities that make a good common sense and common swap. And that's much of what has transpired over the last 9 months, is having that conversation as, is that possible to do? There are a variety of additional things that go along with that. Not only is it the cost of right-of-way, but it is about connectivity. A second consideration is the fact that as you look at this map, and I don't like looking at myself, so can we turn to the map? That as you notice here, all this green area happens to be BLM property. And as you know, oftentimes once development begins to push up against the edge of BLM, what happens to the BLM property? It gets developed. And there are opportunities for many of us who say, you know, we'd really like to have some park and open space. Is there a way to balance that interest and look at the ability to maintain that green space for open space purposes? And it already is under common ownership called the federal government, who tends to want to use it for that purpose. And we have an additional factor. Off of both sides of this, from this side to this side, happens to be a migratory corridor for big sheep and deer and other wildlife. That maybe that makes sense, that we ought to sustain that and maintain that as open space and build it into the fabric of our community. Rather than having every inch look like Los Angeles Basin, maybe we can have areas that truly meet combined needs of interests of people. As you look diagonally through this, you find basically Waterman Wash. Now, Waterman Wash extends off the map at the bottom of this and outside of the planning area, or the general plan proposal all the way down into this area, down towards Interstate 8. And wouldn't it be interesting and wouldn't it be nice if, for a change, we take and build a 30-mile corridor that has open space that people could actually get from one end to the other safely and be able to get to the river and make it part of a connection to El Rio, which is a part of the east-west 18 miles of the Gila River. So why not begin to think about alternative modes of transportation, one of which is using our feet, one of which is using bicycles, one of which is using horses, et cetera, to allow for those very people, and some of these people in this room who desire to have horses, could in fact enjoy that trip versus having to conflict with automobiles and other things. Another reason to look at this is from a growth management perspective. What are the densities and intensities and uses that are going to happen on this particular property can be influenced by several different governmental entities. One, it is the development community coming forward to the county who currently has jurisdiction over all of this property and having that development accordingly, or that the city of Goodyear can have a role and a say in this. And from our perspective, we believe that cities typically look at master planning and everything from a sustainability perspective, that we want sufficient employment there that makes a difference, that we can actually have people living, working, and playing in the neighborhood and not having to commute as these folks have today and as we did several weeks ago, commute that hour and a half, and you as commissioners had the pleasure of that trip as well. That we can, in fact, live in our own community and work in our community. So sustainability is crucial. So we're trying to talk about balancing jobs and balancing residential. On the map, you note that on 238, parallel to it, is also a rail corridor, and that can be part of a major employment center. The kind of densities that we're talking about and the growth potential of this area is roughly 200,000 people. That, in a sense, can also become a regional employment center. It can also have regional malls. It can have regional auto dealers, all those commodities that everybody's looking for. And as a result of this kind of density, it really warrants urban infrastructure and truly warrants urban services. And who is in the best position to provide urban services? Typically, it is cities. It's not to say counties can't, but they were not designed to be in the business of providing the kind of services that we do. They do not have water and sewer responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that opportunity to look at. Ultimately, and I think one of the main questions that has often been brought up is, so how are we going to pay for this? And is growth really going to pay? And are we going to be able to do it in a fashion that there's a reasonable accommodation that the existing community of Goodyear is not going to suffer and not going to subsidize this development? Let's understand that we have 10,000 acres owned by one party, which is Montage. We have 5,000 acres, which is owned by the state of Arizona, who someday will be selling that off, hopefully in one block, which enables us to have the right kind of development and activities. And that area that we have, back to the map, the northern portion we see as logically connecting to all the discussions we've had this evening about all the development area north of Patterson Road. The area to the south, in this area, really truly is such a piece of property, roughly 20,000 acres in the yellowed area and in the purples, et cetera, that is going to be urbanized, that is almost a standalone system from a water and sewer perspective, because it is so distant from the other infrastructure that it warrants its own character, its own capability, its own service capacity. There's enough magnitude there that it makes sense to have it stand on its own. But from our perspective, we believe that ought to be urban services, city provided at the end of the day. So how do we transition from this rural service that we see out there today to an urban service model? It doesn't happen overnight, but in our conversations with the development community, there's a true belief that they can, in fact, put in the infrastructure, that they can finance that infrastructure, and that it is economically feasible for them to even do financial support of the traditional police, fire, public works, parks, and other services when we start from the very beginning recognizing how to get there. It is developing a brand new village within the city of Goodyear where we can have those services. And many of these folks have been through some of those conversations where we say that in order to make that work, we have to balance the two sides. There's going to be a lot of massive infrastructure put in the ground, water, sewer, et cetera, that enables their properties to be viable for development. And for those people that are already living there, they have a standard of care today, which may not be what they like, but they accepted that in the past, but they would like to see over time it intensify and have it so that an ambulance service is responding in 5 minutes and not in 45 minutes or several hours, as I've heard the stories told. That a police officer is arriving in a period of time less than an hour in some instances, and in others longer than that, depending on where that officer is, oftentimes out of Gila Bend, who may also be clear out west of that at Dateland or any other place. We have in our discussions with the development community been working on two things. One, connecting the dots, connecting Patterson Road to Mobile area through the Sonoran Valley with a road system that we believe over the next 3 to 5 years can be in place. Let's recognize that there's environmental issues. Let's recognize that BLM and the federal government have a say in how you get across their property. Let's recognize that there are native land, or the native vegetation and the animals, et cetera, have to be balanced in that. But we believe that it is reasonable and possible that in 3 years we could be under construction, if not sooner. But all those things have to come into play. And to have that connectivity that enables people to move north and south versus have a cul-de-sac at the end of Patterson Road, which says you can only drive there, and we turn around, we go back out the same way we came in. All Pecos Road, Ahwatukee. Let's avoid those kind of conditions as we think in this broader context. It is in our conversations with the developers and our contractual negotiations that they will advance 100% of that road. But over time, let's also understand that the beneficiaries of that road are not solely that area, and that there are people that are benefiting outside of their area. Therefore, other people should participate in the benefit of that. And part of that is the city on a regional basis, and part of that is the adjacent properties around the development. So Montage Holdings is saying, look, we'll put up the front end, but we only control 50% of the land, or less than that, roughly 33%. And others ought to be willing to participate in that through cost recovery and whatever else. So everybody's going to benefit from that. On the public safety, the parks, et cetera, parks and those elements are going to be put in place by them. The service elements come into play, the user fees come into play, and that begins to finance what will be the staff and ultimately the city's overall service. The public safety model, which many people are most concerned about, is transitioning from the existing conditions over time into a full-blown service level. You do not do it overnight when you only have 1 or 2 houses out there. You may not get there when the first 1,000 houses are there, but you do as you bring in the retail, as you bring in those other things. The developer is paying, and as the property tax and things come in, we will cross that line where there is a point that economically the developer no longer is financing the cost of services. The city has been able to absorb that cost. Will it be 100%? Maybe not, but it'll probably be much closer than some of the efforts we've made so far in trying to get there, because statutorily we have no other authority to do it. But we have willing partners standing up and saying it's the right thing to do. It is not the right thing to do to impose these urban service costs on an existing community. They'll step up, they will finance, they will support that effort going on. And in part, it's largely an educational process. There is a different way of doing business in Arizona, at least in the city of Goodyear. They want to be a party to that. We want to be a partner in that effort. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and those in the audience, this is about seeing a vision, doing something about taking advantage of that opportunity, and ultimately, in the long term, controlling our destiny. If we want to manage our destiny in the future, and if we want to minimize the public costs, and especially when it comes down to freeways, which are, recently we ran across some numbers about $15 million to buy 80 acres just for a right-of-way. You add that up when you're talking about 15 miles, a 1,000-foot corridor, and that becomes real money. As Ev Dirksen once said, $1 million here, $1 million there, and you finally are spending real money. We think that there is an opportunity here in a collaborative effort that makes good sense for the city. We think that it makes good sense for the developers, and I'd be happy to have them come up here, because I'm taking the money out of their pocket. They ought to at least have a chance to speak about how that's spent. But Garth and his folks have done a tremendous job on this. The Elliott Home folks that preceded them did an excellent job in that conversation as well. And we would hope that all the other parties that have a stake in that remaining 10,000 acres, and whether big or small, they all should have a say and understand what this means to them. They will not see overnight City of Goodyear services in all instances. It may very well be the sheriff's office for a while as a contract because they're already there. But we ought to talk about augmentation of that set until we can get there. They have telecommunication linkages that we don't have today. We've got to actually go out there and build some major cell towers and a few other things, because as you all know, the nice thing about the meeting that night that we went to, nobody could talk to anybody else in the valley because your cell phones didn't work. Well, we got to fix that. We got to fix the interoperability. We got to fix the ability to have the conversations and the safety factors that are important here. And this, we believe, is a comprehensive approach. It's done by 95 square miles. It is done by recognizing that if we don't do it, we have an opportunity to mess up our future. If we do it, at least we're in control of how we mess it up. and we can do it together. I do not want to be remembered for that last statement either. So, thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. I think you've answered the question to my satisfaction, and I appreciate you being here. I think in my 8 years on the commission, I think I can only think of one other time when you came before us formally, and we appreciate you being here this evening.
My great pleasure.
One comment, if you don't mind, Chairman. Stephen, I wanted to thank you also for coming out. It was about a year and a half ago, we saw some land come just south of Australia Mountain, and we thought, we're not ready for this. We've got no infrastructure there. I mean, and now we're looking at 95 square miles further than what that was. And I would originally have the same concerns and issues that I had at that time. But after just hearing you discuss thinking out of the box and recognizing early on that there is a huge disconnect, I see that this is truly a different model that we haven't seen happen anyplace else in the valley. So I'm really supportive of this, and I'm encouraged by the fact that this is a partnership. And I just wanted to say thank you for thinking out of the box. Thank you for working with the development community and coming up with what looks like not just a great solution for the city of Goodyear, but for those who will be living in these areas. We hope that we can provide them with the services that they really need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Thank you, Mr. Cleveland.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, members of the public, I have a few slides that I wanted to speak with you about. As the Commission is aware, during the 60-day review period, we sent the Sonoran Valley General Plan Amendment application out to several different parties. This is a very large area, almost 100 square miles. Staff has continually been trying to wrap our arms around the plan, to review it, to make sure that the plan is such that it will be a benefit to the city. And we have taken in a very high volume of comments throughout the 60-day review period, and we continue to take in a high number of comments each week. And so what I would like to do is show you, we started with an initial plan, and in your packet you have a handout that RBF just was able to just barely print for you that contains a new land use plan. And I would like to note some of the changes the staff is recommending. And first, I'm going to focus in on the portion of the application that the state land owns the majority of the property. And I'll refer you back to the discussion that we had at the beginning of the meeting on the transportation framework. And you can see in the initial plan and the revised plan is very slightly reconfigured to show the new transportation framework. You can see there's very minor changes. The state has asked us to not designate this area as a park, well, let me explain that. The city of Goodyear we do not have the authority to designate private property as park space, and so the way we take care of that is when the development applications come through the city, the general plan policies are such that the zoning applications would have to comply with the level of service requirements that the general plan outlines. So we did have to technically remove that park space. You can see that the transportation network has been modified very slightly. So there is not too many changes on this particular portion of the application. Moving on to the area that Montage owns, approximately 10,000 acres, there are a number of changes that I wanted to note for you and to try to explain very quickly to you. And again, you each have a revised plan, 11 by 17, that we just gave to you. The first revision that I wanted to mention is in regards to the Loop 303, and you can see the 303 is shown here in this red line here. So initially, you can see that there was kind of a harsh bulb there. The staff recommended that the alignment be revised to slightly minimize that bulb and to to make more of a north-south approach. You can also see that when the 303 came through the community, it was basically bordering on the Sonoran Desert Monument. And so this is essentially moving that away a little bit further. So it's providing for a better entrance into the future community. The spacing of arterial crossings has also been refined to provide better spacing for interchanges if they're needed in the future. In regards to State Route 238, the initial plan you can see kind of deviated from the rail line, and the new proposal shows it pulled back to be parallel with the railroad. It's been straightened and isolated from the community, pulled to the railroad to allow through traffic and traffic to the community and to waste management to flow more smoothly, rather than having the 238 up into the community farther. Staff is recommending that it be pulled back down. Another comment that we received from a lot of people was that a lot of the roadways were curvilinear, and it would be difficult for particularly this area here. So staff made a revision to that arterial. I want to talk for a few minutes on the waste management property. As you know, the landfill is located in this dark purple area. And Waste Management has requested a half-mile buffer around their landfill operations to help preserve the landfill and also to ensure that residential and commercial uses will not be negatively impacted in the future. And you can see in the current plan, and then the change to the revised plan. So we have added some light industrial property here. It's actually a quarter mile from that point to this point. We've actually also added some commercial. The dark red is regional commercial. The more pink color is community commercial. There's also an area here which was changed to light industrial. So again, to make sure that there's a better buffer adjacent to the landfill. In regards to the village center, the village center has been slightly reconfigured. You can see some new colors. There's now some brown colors that are introduced into the village area. The village center is really it's a higher intensity area, and this is where you would want the most intensity. And the staff believes that this is appropriate, but particularly before you saw a lot of these, they appear white, but they're on this map. The mixed use designation was redefined, and you have a printout of that. In addition, portions were changed to specific land use. For example, some of the portions were changed to light industrial, some of them were changed to community commercial, and there are, as I mentioned, there are new areas in brown, high-density residential. So there are now more high-density residential, specifically high-density residential, designated in the village center area. There are two regional commercial parcels. I already mentioned this one, that it's kind of acting as a buffer. There's also this one here. Staff believed that this was an appropriate location next to the 303 on the going home side of the freeway. In addition, Montage, they did some work on some economic analysis, and they feel very strongly that that would be a good site for a regional mall, and it's a traffic-driven location, so that was revised accordingly. Another designation that I wanted to note, this area here shown in light purple was changed to light industrial. You'll note that the railroad runs across this area, so there's a real opportunity for some light industrial development due to the location of the railroad tracks and also the direction of the railroad tracks. Staff believes that this makes sense due to the area's proximity to the railroad. And also wanted to talk about some parks. Again, I talked about parks a few minutes ago, but you can see there's some park areas here, and you don't see them anymore on the new plan. When Elliott Holmes originally designed this plan, those areas are private property, and we cannot designate a park space on private property without property owner's authorization. And so the way we will take care of that is, again, as I mentioned, the general plan provides specific level of service requirements for parks and open space, and specific locations for parks will be determined when the development applications are submitted to the city. So you will note that the before and after pictures for parks, it's going to appear that the park space is decreased, but that's the reason for it. Finally, the last thing that I'll note here is that there are two small commercial pieces that have been added. You'll see that there's one here, and there's also another one right here. We have received comments from the development community. You'll note that this commercial piece is adjacent to two arterial roadways. This commercial piece is also adjacent to the 303 and also a major arterial roadway. Staff did agree that staff believes that this commercial area would be needed to serve the land holdings to the south. So this concludes the presentation by staff. Staff is available to answer any questions that you might have. There are representatives from Montage, so we can try to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Any questions of staff?
Chairman Horst.
Mr. Bay.
Brett, thank you for the presentation. I guess I do have some concerns. Since we are not allowed to show parks as at least planned, then it would appear as though we're going to mitigate that with verbiage in the general plan itself, which I think is all well and good, but how do we then capture where we want these parks to be and how they interact with the communities as they get developed? I guess I'm kind of fuzzy on how do we actually identify them without visually knowing where they'll be graphically.
Chairman Horstman, Commissioner Bay, it's a great question. The staff's thought was we do need to have the text revised accordingly. The text of the Sonora Valley application does need to note that, specifically in the open space section, that all of the development will be subject to the Goodyear's current parks and open space policy. One of the things you'll note in our current general plan is that we do have a section on parks and open space, and there are kind of tentative locations to make sure that there are community parks and neighborhood parks kind of evenly spread throughout the area. One thing that Montage and Joe Porter may want to discuss briefly is their vision for the park systems in this area. You will see in the near future, one of the first phase, they've submitted a planned area development for 690 acres. And you'll see when that application comes before you that they are providing in excess of the general plan requirements for open space. They are proposing to have more parks but smaller parks. So again, the way that staff would take care of that is when each development application comes forward, we would have to evaluate that and to ensure that there would be a level of service for the entire area which would be proposed to be zoned.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Did anyone from Mr. Porter?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Joe Porter. I'm with Montage Holdings, 6720 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 335. I just want to say that it's been a great deal of pleasure to work with the staff and to see the public input and the plan get better and better and better. We are absolutely delighted with everything that happens. The transportation framework plan, I think, when it gets to the southern portion, is an improvement, and the plan that the staff the changes the staff have made, we think, are excellent. Just one comment about the parks, because I think it's a very good question. It's a little tough to look up there and not see any green on a plan at this scale. We will be bringing forward very quickly a PAD plan for our 10,000 acres. And as Brett said, we've already done a plan for the 690, and a lot of things that you typically talk about in general terms at this scale, we've got details on how we think they should be implemented in this new community. And when we bring forward the 10,000-acre PAD, we'll have the park system very clearly delineated, and I think it'll set a pattern that then will set the stage for the development. It's a very good question, and that's how we'll address it, and we'll do that soon.
Thank you.
If there are any questions, I'd be happy to.
Any other questions, Mr. Porter?
I don't really have a question. I have a general comment,
Okay.
I guess. For the past couple months, I truly have been riding the fence regarding this issue, and it's an uncomfortable position. As I heard Mr. Cleveland mention destiny and vision, and I truly believe that our city can take that to a great arena. And I have vision for this. What I've been uncomfortable with has been the land use map, and truly the phasing of connectivity between Goodyear and this area. I'm happy to see your revised plan. That gives me a little more feeling of confidence. I don't know that I'm 100% with it, but I do feel that you've gotten better. I have concern over the area of the railroad, and it had been of the landfill also. I don't know if that speaker will be speaking this evening about the landfill or if that has been taken care of. But, I'm getting there. I think that you've made a great improvement on your revised plan.
I'll just, since that's not a question, it's just
No, that's why I said it was a
observation.
comment.
I'll give you an observation back. The highway and railroad corridor are a major barrier through the community, and we've known that since before we bought the first 1,000 acres and then bought the other 9,000 acres. And the reason that the road was straightened on the right-hand plan is to say, okay, that's a transportation corridor. In the future, that highway is going to be a divided highway, 6-lane highway, and it's going to be a freeway. And that the railroad track is going to have not one track, but 2 and possibly 3, and that's going to be a major transportation corridor. So our notion is to keep it together, to berm it, to landscape it, to really separate it from the community. And one of the changes in the plan was to adjust the north-south connections so we have freeway spacing, good freeway access, and to really deal with it for what it's going to be, as a barrier, and to deal with it as best we can, recognizing that it is a barrier. And then the purple in the center is an opportunity to, since we've got the major east-west railroad track kind of coming through our property, let's capitalize on it and try and get some employment out of it. So, it's there and it's not going to change. And I have to tell you, we and the people who owned the property before looked at different road alignments, separating the road, and the best thing to do is just make it the best barrier in the region. As far as the landfill is concerned, the landfill is there. It's an operating landfill. There have to be landfills. We're satisfied with the setbacks. We think that it goes beyond coexisting. It requires us to work together and have our land use plan the landfill plan actually, you know, I mean, they went out there, they were all alone, they really don't probably need us, but, you know, we're there. And so we've talked to them about ways to get better access to the property and possibly get rail access to the property. And from our standpoint, we'll continue to work together to have a great relationship. All right? Okay? Thank you very much.
Other questions, Mr. Porter?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this case? Yes, sir. Come on up and...
I'm Glenn Weinberger. I own land on the east side of Section 8. It's 276 acres. I'll try to show you where it is here. Oops.
He's got a PowerPoint for us.
Can you back up to for me real quick, Chef?
Yeah.
My 276 acres is right here, the east part of Section 8, and I have a construction debris landfill right there. Waste Management has a municipal solid waste landfill west of that and south of that. And I have requested that my land be allowed to stay in the county. And the reason for that is to keep the taxes down. Adding the city taxes to 276 acres of commercial property has a substantial impact on a commercial enterprise. I can only speak for myself. I don't know what other people in the area are in favor of the city general plan amendment and perhaps future annexation, and I don't know who opposes it. I can only really speak for myself. I have talked to Garth Weger and Joe Porter. I esteem them. I like them. I highly respect them. They have great character, and they have assured me that they will do everything in their power to allow me to remain in the county there. But that is the caveat there, is the phrase keeps coming up, in so much as it is legally possible to do that. Now, it hasn't been shown to me at this point by either the city or Montage that it is legally possible. And I believe them when they're saying they will do everything in their power to allow me to remain in the county. But that is the question that I have, is the city of Goodyear also in favor of that? And if so, can Montage and the city of Goodyear show me that it is legally possible to remain in the county with my property? And that's my only comment.
I appreciate the comment. I'm not sure that any of us have the answer at this time, and I don't know that Mr. Kraus is in a position to do that at this point in time. And it's good to have that on the record. But what we're doing now is the planning boundary, and the annexation is a whole nother process, and will probably be done in some phasing rather than necessarily all at one time. So stay tuned.
Okay. I have no objection to the general plan amendment or future annexation, but my desire and request is that my property be allowed to remain county.
Understand. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Sean?
Yes.
Excuse me, I just wanted to ask one question. Have you logged your issues, and is it like captured in maybe our comments catalog?
Yes, I have.
Okay, all right. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure it's on record, otherwise it could fall in the crack.
Yes, it has.
All right.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, Commission, thank you very much for the opportunity to present tonight. I just wanted to share that Glenn has been in touch with us quite a bit from the very first meeting that we've had out there in the community, and we're very, very grateful for the chance to adjust things. We've sent him a letter, and tonight he voiced a concern after having looked at some maps with an attorney, and I assured him this evening that we will be together with him, showing him one or two strategies to make sure that he does have the ability to stay within the county, and we will continue to exercise that effort in earnest. Also, just want a chance to say thank you very much for the chance to talk through this process. You're doing exactly what a planning commission was meant to do, and that is to properly think out the zoning issues within the future of the community. It's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's questioned, but the leadership shown tonight, I think, is going to stand in good stead for the community of Goodyear as a whole. I'm very appreciative of the city manager to voice his strong feelings regarding this entire area. I think many of you have seen what can happen when pre-planning is not done, and the conflicts such as the one you spoke about this evening with another community. Those kinds of things with forethought don't ever have to interrupt the practical growth of the city, and we just appreciate the chance to work with the staff that's here in Goodyear. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Any further comments from the Commission? If not, I'll close the public hearing and ask for Commission action.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue this hearing on the Sonoran Valley until the December 13th meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Bay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That's the last item on our agenda. Is there any staff communication?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I just wanted to inform you and the public that the City Council's, as I've indicated earlier, is required to have a public hearing on all 7 general plan amendments at the same meeting in the same year that they're filed. So originally it was scheduled for December 11th. However, there was a advertising snafu, and due to that, we've moved that meeting a week later. It's December 18th. It'll be a special meeting of the City Council. I believe it'll be at the Justice Facility. As far as I know, it's at the Justice Facility on the 18th at 6 p.m. So for the benefit of the public as well as the Commission, there will be a public hearing. Action on these items is not recommended, since obviously the Commission has not taken action on these items. However, as you notice, 6 of the 7, we're moving those public hearings into your later meeting in January. However, on the Sonoran Valley application, there is some sense of urgency to get that one moving forward for a couple of reasons I can go into later, but we're moving that public hearing into the December 13th to see if the Commission feels comfortable moving that one forward. So that's the game plan. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Okay. What's your anticipation of the December 13th meeting in terms of cases? Is that a pretty busy one?
There's 5 or 6 additional items, plus the Sonoran Valley.
Any other business before the Commission? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Oh, yeah.
We're adjourned.